Hello, Meditation Mastery. How are you doing? It's nice to be back. So, I have been very sick for the last week and a half, and that included losing my voice for the last 5 days. So, I have most of my voice back, so I thought it would be a good time to give a talk. Being sick is something that often happens unexpectedly and unwantedly, but it actually gives us a chance to relax. It gives us a chance just to rest, forces us to rest, actually. And I feel like the unpleasantness of it also really forces us to be present and maybe forces us to, give a little self care and a little self love. So I'm happy to kind of be through that. But just before that, actually, I led an educators retreat. So I was with a group of teachers for a weekend, and I was training them in meditation and mindfulness and helping them kind of develop strategies to bring to the classroom, but more so helping them find for themselves ways to cope with life, right? Ways to manage life and stay in more of an emotionally good place, I guess you could say. And the day that I lost my voice, I was actually leading meditation in the classrooms. So I went into sixth grade classrooms all day. So I went to 8 back-to-back classes. So 8 40-minute block classes, one after the other, just talking, giving these presentations to the whole sixth grade class of a school. And there's something that was really interesting that happened as I was talking. Um, I was asking them questions and I was interacting with the kids. And I said, you're in a system right now that maybe has different values than you, right? A school is there so that you learn, it's there to give you an academic education. But maybe your value is more like friends and connecting and being outdoors, right? So maybe you have a value misalignment with the school, and that's kind of a place where you'll feel some stress, right? A place of discomfort. And maybe some of you also feel that from your parents, right? Maybe your parents want you to be a certain way. They have a certain value system on your life, and you have a different one. And the conflict, the space between those two values, that causes stress, right? That causes some pain. And I thought about this, and I looked at them, and I said this to every class, each one of these 8 classes, and I had them raise their hand, who feels that they have values different than school and who feels they have values different than their parents. And then I looked at the kids and I said, how many of you actually feel like there's nobody in your life, nobody in your entire life right now that really knows who you are, that really sees you? And I had about 5 kids of each class raise their hands. So that was like each class of 20, 25 kids, 5 kids in each class. So it was like between a fifth and a fourth of the entire student body, spaced out, raised their hands. So it's like 20, 25%. And it was kind of shocking, and I had them keep their hands up, and I had other kids look around and say, how does this make you feel? And they said, oh, it's sad. It must be lonely, right? That they kind of started connecting emotionally to this. But I got thinking about this more, and I said, I bet if I asked the seventh graders, I'd also get 20%. I bet if I asked the eighth graders, I get 20%. I bet if I asked the eighth graders in another school, I would get 20%. And then I thought, I bet if I asked adults, they might also have the same percentage. That it's possible that actually like 20% or a fifth of us, we feel alone. We feel that there's nobody who really knows us deeply, who really sees us. There's nobody that we feel comfortable to fully be ourselves around. Whether we feel like ashamed, whether we feel like if we showed our real self, it would break those relationships, because there's different, alignments, different value alignments. Maybe we are just afraid of being ourselves. We're afraid of being rejected. We're afraid of not being perfect. We're afraid of somehow falling out of line, out of the row or something. That there's a lot of different reasons, I think, that people, they don't show themselves, they don't connect openly and authentically. But it's kind of a staggering figure if you think about that. That if you're walking down the street and you're in your car, Potentially, and I don't know if this is just for kids or if it's for adults, so that'd be an interesting thing to kind of look into. But, just the potential that 1 out of every 5 people feels isolated, right? That 1 out of every 5 people feels alone, that they feel that there's nobody that really fully knows them. And that is sad, right? That is sad. And so that's just a really important thing just to know and to acknowledge. And also, it starts to build a different kind of, almost like a compassion and an understanding in the heart. Um, but for myself, I even feel like it builds almost like motivation or inspiration. I have this feeling like I want to reach out to people more. I went to Boston this morning, and I went with a friend to a cafe, and I just started talking to some random people and just being friendly. And then I actually looked out the window as I was drinking a coffee, and I saw a blind man, and he was, he crossed the street, and he was really quick, and he went. I was like, wow, he's moving, and he has a stick. But then he was trying to come back across the street, and he had a walk sign, but for some reason he was hesitating, and he didn't really know, and I saw him kind of doing something with his hand. And then he kind of started to go, and then one of the cars wanted to go, and it was this kind of situation. And I just put down my coffee and I ran outside and crossed the street, and I, grabbed him and I said, "You're good to go." And he goes, "Good to go, man?" And I go, "Good to go, brother." And I kind of took him across the street, and he's like, "Oh, thank you." And I just felt just kind of this need to, and I kind of actually after that I was like, man, I almost want to just like walk this guy home and just be like, look, like I'm, I'll be your eyes, but he got it, he was zipping along. So, he's been doing this for a while, and he knew what he was doing. But this compassion, right? This feeling of just wanting to reach out and connect to people, of not wanting anybody that I encounter throughout my day to be one of those, 5. Not having to see somebody and to have the chance to reach out to someone, to have the chance to interact, to bring somebody out of that place of loneliness, out of that place of feeling isolated. And there's about 50 people in this group. It looks like about 25 who watch the talks regularly. So that means potentially, 5 people that are watching this talk, maybe more, maybe less, right? But at least a few of you are going to hear this and say, my God, that's me. I'm one of those people. I'm one of those people myself that I feel that there's nobody in my life that I can completely and honestly and authentically share myself with. So I understand that as a kid, because you're kind of trapped in a situation, you're trapped in a family, you're kind of trapped in a school. I think that as we become older, when we become adults, it's almost our job and our responsibility to create a life for ourselves, to create friendships, to create networks of support, to maintain those, to find a partner who we can really be open and authentic about everything with, as much as possible, but to really make sure that in your life you have people. People are just so important. I think that we're so focused these days, especially on money, on jobs, positions, right? Even in my world, a lot of people are talking about purpose, but I don't really hear people talking about communities or friendships almost ever. And I think that, Tony Robbins said something interesting. He said, the quality of your life is defined by the quality of the emotions that you have in your life. And if you look at the emotions that you feel, what are your, maybe I would say, most meaningful memories, your most meaningful feelings, emotional states? Some of them may have been these like epic places you visited, right? Or you won some award or something paid off. But a lot of things have to do with connections, interpersonal things with friends, things with parents or children or partners, that a lot of people as they're passing away, and I've done some work with people as they've been passing away, and also I've led death meditations where I lead people through this process of dying, kind of like in a meditative form, but in a way that they really start to feel it and they start to kind of have their values crystallize. And I say, what is it that really matters to you, and what do you wish you did differently? And at the end of those death meditations, I don't often hear people saying things like, I wish I had a different job, right? Or oh man, I never got to go to Peru or something. It almost always comes back to the people in their lives. I, I even once had a woman just yell "I love you" out as I was counting down, like, 10 seconds left to live, 5 4, she's like, "I love you," like, just this last moment. If she was about to die, the last thing that mattered to her was just to make that last loving connection to those people around her, right? And after the meditation, when we reflected, a lot of the people said things like, I really want to connect more to my kid or to my partner, or that there's something on the emotional level that was unfulfilled, that a lot of people feel. Even when I see ghost stories, or like unsolved mysteries, or paranormal things, like when you see or hear ghost stories, right? Often it's that somebody was on their way to a wedding and they died, or somebody was waiting for their husband at sea and he died, right? Or that there's often these intense interpersonal connections that it's as if people were not able to let go of those, that even in death, they're still trying to get to that wedding, right? They're still waiting for their husband to come home. They're still waiting and trying to get that connection, that it's that powerful, right? It's this incredibly powerful thing, this connection. And something that I've been working on is first of all, just kind of acknowledging how important people are in my life, and friendships especially. And even all of you, right? That there's even relationships that we have in our communities, in our spiritual groups, in our jobs, that just connecting to other people. I mean, I know I'm like talking into a camera, but I get feedback from people that things I've said have helped them. So it still is it's a connection loop in different ways. But just how important the people are, and how we often neglect that. We often take that for granted. And sometimes it kind of comes back to burn us, right? It comes back to bite us. That sometimes we'll look around and we'll realize that we're actually quite lonely, right? Or we feel quite unfulfilled. And if you don't feel like that, if you have a great family or partner, you have great friends, and that's going, I would say, awesome. And still really acknowledging those people, being grateful for them, letting them know that you're grateful. The sickness is still kind of here. But really letting people know you're grateful. It's something that I've been doing, is that after I spend time with a friend, I say to them, I'm grateful for this friendship. I say, thank you for being my friend. Thank you for being there, right? To give that validation, to acknowledge that. And this has a lot to do with being present. This has a lot to do with I would say it's like our value system, but in terms of like our conscious value system. So when I say this, I mean, I think we all have things that are important to us in kind of like an ascending or descending scale. But I don't think that we're really always aware of what those things are. I remember once when I was a monk, I did like an experiment, and I said, I'm going to become a homeless monk. So I left the monastery and I just started walking down the street, and I said, okay, now I have nothing, right? So I started really going through the motions of this exercise, and I was walking down the street and I was feeling this vulnerability, and like I was an outsider, and I was walking and I was like, okay, where am I going to sleep tonight? Am I going to sleep in a bus stall kind of thing, right? Whatever those things are called, like the bus stop overhangs. Am I going to meet people? What is this going to look like? Where am I going to end up? How am I going to get food, right? I'm going to have to beg. I felt this vulnerability and this fear, right? And it was almost sad. Just had an edit there. Okay. So I was walking and I was looking for places to sleep, and I was trying to figure out, what I was going to do. And I felt really vulnerable, and I felt alone, and I felt sad, right? That I was alone. And I had this really deep realization that we as humans, we have nothing. That the neutral state of a person is zero, is to have nothing. And anything we have above that is actually a gain. If you have family that's still alive, if you have any friends, if you have clothes, if you have food, money, a home, that anything you have, it's like a plus. And because, I was born into a family that had a home, I was kind of just had friends from growing up that I had all of these things, and they were kind of just, they were taken for granted just because they'd always been there. I had always just had all of this. It was always just what it meant to be me. And to experience what it was like to be completely alone and with nothing, it was very sobering, right? And it was very humbling. And it was really, it was one of these moments where I realized, wow, like you can be grateful for everything. That gratitude can really be such a basic state, because everything that I have is a plus. And that's not even to mention like a functioning body, and eyes. And I was with a blind guy today, and it's like, geez, like what must that be like to go through this world blind, right? It's crazy. So just to realize that, it allowed me to have a certain sense of thankfulness and gratitude for what I do have, and see things and appreciate them. And I think that aside from just appreciating things, it's really important that we also communicate that appreciation to those people around us, that we really share that we strengthen those connections with loving words, right? With loving acknowledgments. Whether, again, it's our partners, our parents, our kids, our coworkers, just if there's anybody that you actually feel it to, and, don't force it, but what are we waiting for? And so often we're so busy with our heads and, whatever, work or planning, or that we don't see the actual people around us. So you don't take time to look people in the eyes and say, wow, hi, thank you for being there. I love you. I'm sorry. Whatever we need to kind of say to make that connection, to reestablish these connections. It's actually quite simple, although sometimes you need to be brave to do it. You have to break through sometimes some fear. But it's so important, and it's so, I would say, essential to being a human being. But if nothing else, even if it's not just for yourself, if it's not just purely for that it feels good to do it and that it helps to maintain friendships and connections, think about those other people. And if 1 in 5 is the true number, my gosh, right? Think about all the people in your life. Do you think that anybody in your life is one of those 1 in 5? Is there somebody that's close to you that maybe you think you know them, right? Or maybe you think that you're connecting to them, but actually they're holding something back, that maybe they don't feel fully confident or comfortable or safe to share everything that's going on within themselves. That, we should really take it a little bit as our job, I would say, and our responsibility. And not in a way that feels like pressured or, you're bad if you don't do it, but more in a way of just coming from the heart that, look, if I'm somebody that has pluses in my life and I have this gratefulness and I have people and I have that feeling of being connected and together, why not just extend that out to others? And for all you know, you're going to make somebody's day, or even more than that, right? Maybe you're going to reach out to somebody in friendship and you might be the only friend in their life, whether you know it or not. Even if they have a lot of people around them, if you can provide them with like a genuine bridge, a genuine connection, that is something that can save somebody's life, that can save somebody's soul, right? Depends on how you want to look at it. That they say a lot of school shootings, right? The kids, it's because they feel disconnected. A lot of the opioid use, people that feel disconnected, right? That this feeling of disconnection is actually often the problem that everything else stems from. And it's such a hard form of suffering. I've been going through some difficult things in my life, and I found that what gets me through them is sharing with friends, to have that support network, to have people that can help hold things with me, that ultimately I go through, I walk my path alone. However, other people are there holding my hand and supporting me, and it makes it easier. It's not as hard. And we're all going through stuff. All of us are going through something, right? Or some things, maybe more accurately, all of us. So to kind of see it as an opportunity, but as just a real beautiful, form of service to reach out to others, to connect. In meditation, there's something called, there's like a metta meditation. Metta means loving kindness. And in this meditation of loving kindness, and from the words of the Buddha himself, the Buddha gave a teaching, and he said, may we wish upon all others that they may be happy, from highest sky into the deepest depths above and across, and those who are here, those who are gone, those who are living close to us, those who are far away, those born, those to be born. So pretty much saying like all beings, may all beings be happy. And really making this prayer and sending that energy out into the world. May all beings really be happy. My gosh, may nobody feel alone. May nobody have to feel afraid and isolated. May everyone be safe and protected. Making these prayers, it starts to generate this beautiful energy in the heart, this beautiful compassion and positivity and connection, but then also acting on that energy, right? Then also being a vessel of that, right? Being a bridge of that, connecting it out, living your life in that way. Bringing this positivity into your life, it also creates more of a happy, peaceful mind. It creates a happy, peaceful community. And same kinds of things, like I've said before, it's, when you're creating happiness, when you're creating peace and positivity, when you sit to meditate, it's like half the work is already done because you're living your life in a more uplifted way, right? So sometimes during these meditation talks, I go more into the mechanics and dynamics of meditation. But sometimes I just talk about life because the way that you live your life is the way you're going to meditate. And the way you meditate is the way you live your life. And it's the same thing, but because through meditation we can see ourselves more clearly through our actions. Whereas when you're meditating, it's all so subtle, you don't really see what you're doing as much, right? And we can see ourselves. So you can look at the mind or you can look out. And between those two things, you usually get a pretty good grasp of where you're at. That maybe you sit and you're all peaceful in meditation, but then when you leave your room, you start fighting with everybody. And I'd be like, well, there's the thing to look at, right? Or maybe, life is really busy and busy and busy, and then you sit to meditate, and then your mind is busy and busy, busy. And I'd say, yeah, exactly, right? That you can see your whole self by first seeing how am I just inside of myself? How am I then through my senses interacting with my environment, still alone, but I'm able to kind of be here and do things? And then how am I in the social scene? How am I when I'm interacting with other people? Yeah, what are those levels? And sometimes we do like eye gazing meditation where you sit with your eyes closed and you feel how you're feeling. And then you open your eyes and you look somebody else in the eyes and you start to feel like maybe you'll feel like this happiness and a warmth. Maybe you'll feel like a tightness and a nervousness. That just by opening up your eyes and seeing somebody else in front of you looking at you, it creates all of these reactions, right? All these feelings, all of these beliefs start to come up. And then you close your eyes again and you feel how your body's shifted and you breathe and you let it relax and you look again and then you see it all come up. And it's this really fascinating kind of exercise because nothing is changing. It's like that person has been there the whole time, you're here the whole time. The only thing that's changed is that you're seeing it, that you're processing it. And it allows you to just look and see your internal mechanisms and how they work and how you work, right? That meditation, it has a foot in both worlds, right? That, on the path of the Buddha and Buddhism, you need to work on your, meditation and your mindfulness and your, quiet sitting practice. But you also need to work on the way that you live your life. That the way, I was in a monastery and we had to help each other, and we had to be harmless, and there was no lying, and there's nothing that's malicious, and that you try to live in a more supportive way, and you try to live in a more quiet way. You only really say what's necessary, and you really live a very conscious lifestyle. But then you see that the meditation starts improving because the way that you're living your life starts feeding into the meditation. And also in the meditation, you're watching your mind spinning, and you're like, my God, my mind is spinning. So when you get out of the meditation, you say, I'm going to do everything a little bit slower today because I've just taken my temperature, right? I've just seen how my mind is today. And I was like, oh, my mind's a little bit busy. So I'm going to kind of go a little bit slow today for my mind because I see that I'm kind of in a place that I'm a little bit distracted. There's a lot going on. So we need to kind of see both of those things play in those worlds. Specifically, when we start talking about the emotional world, that the path of meditation, it only works if it feels good. You can only meditate if it feels good. You're sinking into peace. Peace is a feeling. So if we know that the path is about creating feeling, it's a feeling path, then why wouldn't we already start creating those positive feelings even off the cushion, right? And at the end of the day, like, again, Tony Robbins, right? It's like you're living in a room or you're sitting, maybe even like, say you're sitting like in a car, and the upholstery, the stuff that you're like sitting on and resting and pushing against, those are your feelings. Like your feelings are the upholstery of your experience, right? That if you feel happy, if you feel blissful, then like you're doing well, then you are happy, you are blissful, right? Whatever you're feeling, that's like whether you're going to call your experience good or bad is what you feel. So why wouldn't we, all of us, kind of like all the time, it's kind of silly, but why don't we all spend more time creating situations that arise positive feelings in us and also in others? Why not share the good feelings? Because also sharing feels good. And at the end of the day, it's like if you're really happy, but everyone else around you is miserable, your happiness is going to be affected. That's just reality. So sometimes it's also selfish to share your happiness, right? The Dalai Lama calls it being wisely selfish, because he's like, you can also be selfish and being compassionate because you know it feels good, and it's good for you that other people like you, and it's good for you that you're creating a pleasant environment, right? It's like the best way to be selfish is like to be happy and to share happiness, right? But above all else, taking it back to that place of compassion, taking it back to that place of really caring about other people, feeling what it would be like if I am that person, or maybe you are that person, or maybe you was that person, maybe you were that person, back in, elementary school or middle school or high school, man, I was so alone. It's true. I'm in my 20s, man, I was so alone. Now I'm better, but I bet there's people that feel like that now. Like, let me be a bridge, right? Let me reach out to them. Let me see how I can help. That coming from that place of really caring, just on a very basic human level of caring and compassion, we can extend ourselves out. We can start then also, connecting to this world in love. And that's very uplifting, and that's also very supportive to our spiritual practice and to our mind, right? So friendships, connections, relationships, acknowledging the goodness, speaking that out, telling people thank you, yeah? It's like a homework assignment. After you listen to this talk, just find one person in your life, even if you just text them and say, you know what, thank you for your friendship, right? Or you could see them and say, you know what, I just want to say I really appreciate you. Just speak those words out and you will just see this amazing shift. And that person will go, oh, and it creates a lot of beauty, and it's so simple. And maybe people will give it back to you and you'll say, wow, I didn't even know how much I was appreciated, because no one's been speaking it out to me either. So using that as kind of a template to look, how can I improve other people's lives? How can I make other people happy? How can I make myself happy? By connecting with positive feelings, right? So if I can do something that makes me happy and somebody else happy, it's like double bonus, right? You're helping yourself, you're helping others, and by helping others, you're again helping yourself in another way. So it's a really beautiful practice, and again, it also it helps, it uplifts the mind. It makes us happier. So when you're meditating, we're not so depressed and down in the dumps and feeling frustrated and trying to meditate and we can't and all this stuff, that you're already sitting from this place where you feel good. It feels nice to be here. You feel proud of yourself. You feel loved. And you could just sit in that space of just feeling loved and feeling connection. And that's meditation, right? You just smile and just sink into that positive feeling. And that's all that the practice is, right? You just sink in and everything else just disappears, right? That's all that you need. So I hope that you took some of that to heart. And thank you for listening. I hope that my sickness didn't cause too much distractions. And see you at the meditation.